Would you believe me if I told you this wasn't real brick? We're back with a 3-year update of this renter-friendly faux brick wall because I finally moved and had to take it all down. It was super sad, but I figured someone else might be thinking about recreating this in their space, and it might be nice to know what the removal process is like and to know what the damage is before you start. So screenshot that material list and let's get into it. Outside of the sheer scale of this project, my wall was 33 feet wide and my ceilings were 10.5 feet tall. The most difficult part was painting up the artist canvas. It's a lot easier if you have someone helping you, because if you do it by yourself, you're gonna be looking like this.
Just do your best.
The most important part on this step is to overlap the canvas sheets. I would give it at least 1 inch of overlap, because once you add the joint compound, it's going to shrink the canvas a little bit and you don't want any of your walls exposed. The best method I found is to twist the push pins in a little bit and then hammer it the rest of the way. Once you get your canvas up on the wall, you can start taping off your bricks using 1/2 inch painter's tape, measuring brick size increments of your choosing. I did 3-inch bricks, and you want to make sure you measure across the wall just to make sure it doesn't look slanted. Feel free to get creative with your vertical tape lines, adding varying lengths so that every brick is unique. Once you're ready to spread on your joint compound, you want to make sure you work in pretty small sections because you do not want the joint compound drying down before you move on. Now here is where I have the pins and a lot of different overlapping sections of canvas. So I learned the hard way before on my concrete wall that it's better to just kind of get it on there and then let it separate, let it do what it's gonna do, and then go back later and patch that up once it's kind of set. It's best to peel off the tape of the section you're going to work on because you do not want the joint compound drying down over this tape. It is so much harder to get the tape off. When I look back on my footage, I actually waited 45 minutes before I started adding my acrylic paint, but you're gonna wanna watch this every 15 to 20 minutes or so, depending on how thick or thin your joint compound layer is. You wanna let the joint compound get a little bit tacky. You don't want it to be too wet before you start sponging on your paint. I used acrylic paint. I used burnt sienna and a peach color, as well as black and white acrylic paint. I mixed a little bit of the black in the burnt sienna color to give it that richer tone. I dipped my sponge in the paint, spread it around on each brick, and then I would go back and blend a little bit of the joint compound, a little bit of the paint, spreading it evenly on each brick, making sure I had enough coverage and a nice mix of the different shades. There's no perfect formula to this. I just kind of feel it out, making sure each brick has its own unique fingerprint. To make sure they don't look cookie cutter, I would feather out the edges on each brick because I wanted it to feel like an authentic, worn-in vintage brick look. Now, once your bricks are taking shape, you want to go back in with a dry or semi-dry sponge, because depending on how wet your bricks were in the first place, it's going to leave these peaks, and you do not want these peaks to dry down like that, looking like a 2000 spiky haircut. So if it's still a little wet after you've done your paint, that's okay. Let it dry down a little bit more, then go back in with that dry sponge and make sure the texture looks like this before you let it dry down completely. Now by this point, your canvas has shrunk a little bit. Once the first layer is fully dry, you can go back in with your joint compound and patch the areas where the canvas overlaps. I did a pretty thick layer on these areas. You'll want to wait a while to make sure it tacks up before you add your paint, but after it's fully covered, you can go back through the same process. For me, the grout took the most amount of time. It was so tedious, so I did this a little at a time and definitely recruited a lot of help along the way.
Oh, I didn't see you there. Hey, how's it going? Don't mind me. I'm just a muse doing a painter's job.
For the grout, all you have to do is mix a little bit of joint compound with the pre-mixed grout and a little bit of black and white acrylic paint to get the proper color for your grout lines. Now, when it comes to the edges and working around trim and windows, that can get a little bit difficult and a lot more time consuming. So if you can do a section of your home that doesn't require all that detail work, it's definitely a lot easier. But the same concept applies. You just need to cut around those areas, add some extra push pins to reinforce it to make sure the canvas doesn't shrink away too much from the trim or window that you're covering. And then once everything dries down, I used removable double-sided tape to make the edges lay down a little bit better, and then I added in black paint wherever I could to make it disappear. And finally, I went over all the edges with a little bit of white paint, tidying up any mistakes I may have made. This project was a labor of love, and I don't think I've ever been more proud of something I created. It took me 47 days and a lot of hard work and a lot of help from my friends and loved ones. And even though I had to take it down and I was super sad, I got those 3 years to look up at everything I'm capable of, and it just shows me there really are no limits when it comes to renting. You can still make a space that feels like home and is a true expression of all your creativity. So if you're thinking of making something like this, I wanted to show you the un-makeover process as well, so you can get a full picture of how much work you'd have to put in, as well as any risk involved. Taking it down wasn't too hard. I used a flathead screwdriver to kind of wedge the canvas off the wall, and from there it fell down effortlessly. With the exception of this part where I should have just taken the wood wall down first. You do want to be careful because the push pins are super sharp and I was stabbing myself constantly. Looking back on all this footage, I recognize this was an insane amount of waste. And even though I got to enjoy the project for those 3 years, I really wish I had figured out a way to make this movable to the next space in hindsight. But at this point, I was hyper fixated on making sure I got my security deposit back and making sure I got all of the push pins out of the canvas so that anyone taking out the trash would not be stabbing themselves with my push pins. In terms of wall damage, I wanted to give you a close-up of what the push pin holes look like. My landlord was pretty chill and I probably could have gotten away with not filling this in, but I was just raised to leave things better than I found them. So I went in with this 3M high strength small hole repair, and my walls kind of are satiny. You're supposed to use the other end of the tube to swipe it on, but I ended up using my fingers because it worked a little bit better for me that way. It does dry down kind of gray, so depending on the color of your walls, you might want to have a little bit of touch-up paint on hand. I just brushed over it. I didn't paint the entire wall. I just painted that section and it blended in really nicely, and you can't even tell that I had faux brick there. So I hope that gives you a little peace of mind before tackling a project like this, so you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. I love using my creativity to show you what's possible even when you're renting, to make a space beautiful and cozy and a representation of your own creativity with any budget. And speaking of budget, I want to share how much I spent on this project. For context, my wall was insane. I don't recommend doing this scale if you're renting. My wall was 33 feet wide and my ceilings were 10.5 feet tall. So the bulk of the budget went to artist canvas and the total was $443. In contrast, my concrete wall was about half that budget for a 12 feet wide wall and 10.5 foot ceilings. You can watch my faux concrete tutorial here. These numbers may be a little off because I was doing both projects at the same time, but you get the idea. The canvas is the bulk of the budget, so if you do a smaller wall, that will definitely bring your costs way down. I'm so proud of these projects I created and finding a way to bring my vision to life even as a renter. I hope it inspires you to do something out of the box in your space, so let me know in the comments if you think you would try something like this. Stay tuned for what I dream up in my next space. I have so many fun ideas to share with y'all. See you in the next episode.